Imagine three young punks jumping a hardworking man, beating him so badly he barely survived, thinking they'd get away with it because the city's police had shut down for the weekend. What they didn't know? Their victim's father was a war veteran, calm, patient, and absolutely relentless. And he had friends in very high places. What came next wasn't just revenge. It was a lifetime sentence, without bars. If you've ever dreamed of seeing bullies get exactly what they deserve, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment below about the sweetest revenge story you've ever heard. Because today's tale is about justice so cold, it lasted decades. Let's dive in. This story starts decades ago in a booming Rust Belt city. Back then, if you graduated high school, odds were you could walk straight into the auto plant and land a job that would support you for life. It was steady work, union-protected, and practically a rite of passage. George, the man at the center of this story, was one of those young workers. He'd finished school, landed his spot at the plant, and was building the kind of life most people in town expected. My dad, his buddy, took a different path. He earned a scholarship to study engineering out of town, but whenever he came home on breaks or weekends, he'd catch up with George and the old crew. Life was good, or at least it seemed that way. Then came the night everything changed. My dad got the call from my grandmother. Her voice shook when she told him George had been jumped after his shift at the plant. 3 men ambushed him in the dark, beating him within an inch of his life. For days, no one knew if he would survive. The doctors later admitted it was a miracle he pulled through. But survival didn't mean recovery. George was broken, physically and emotionally. The injuries were so severe he had to retire early, living on disability before his life had even really begun. When my dad visited, he could see it in George's eyes, the quiet frustration, the stolen future. But the real turning point came when George's father, Walter, pulled my dad aside. Walter was a proud man, steady and composed. He'd served in World War II and Korea, though he never bragged about it. He told people he'd been a radio technician, working bases far from the action. He kept his experiences close to the chest. Even his own wife didn't know the details. But underneath that calm exterior was a man forged in battle. Walter asked my dad a simple question. Did he know a guy named Flynn? Dad said yes. Flynn was known around town as a troublemaker. Walter then explained that a wallet had been found near George's body. The paramedics, assuming it was George's, handed it to him. But when Walter opened it, he realized it belonged to Flynn. That was the thread that unraveled the whole thing. Now here's where it gets unbelievable. At the time, the city was so broke that they literally didn't pay police to work on weekends. From Friday night to Monday morning, there were 0 officers on duty. None. That meant George's attack, happening on a Friday night, was practically untouchable by the law. No investigation, no justice, just silence. So when my dad asked Walter what he was going to do about it, Walter gave him a look. Stern, sharp, unblinking. And he said just 5 words. I take care of my own. That was the beginning of a plan so meticulous, so ruthless, that Flynn and his 2 friends, Mac and Zeno, would regret their actions for the rest of their lives. Walter reached out to his network. He was the kind of guy who could make a friend in 5 minutes flat. Over the years, he'd built connections across town, in the plant, in unions, in offices where quiet phone calls could change everything. When he explained what had happened to George, his friends didn't hesitate. They were outraged. This wasn't just about one man getting beaten. It was about justice, about sending a message that you don't destroy a good man's life and walk away. Step 1. Surveillance. For weeks, Walter and his circle watched Flynn, Mac, and Zeno. They listened, they learned. Eventually, they overheard the punks bragging about the attack, laughing at what they'd done to George. That was all Walter needed to hear. Step 2. Infiltration. All 3 worked at the plant, the same plant where union loyalty ran deep. Walter's friends made some calls. Suddenly, tools would go missing right before Flynn's shift. Emergency maintenance would be called at just the wrong time. Schedules were shuffled, so the 3 troublemakers got stuck with the dirtiest, most miserable jobs. They were moved into positions they weren't suited for, where every mistake made them look incompetent. And the whispers began. Rumors spreading like wildfire through the plant, all about how Flynn and his buddies had beaten a fellow worker nearly to death. In that town, reputation was everything. Once the whispers started, the shame followed. People avoided them in the cafeteria. Foremen stopped trusting them. Colleagues turned cold. It wasn't long before the plant became unbearable. And that was exactly the point. After about a year of relentless pressure, Flynn, Mac, and Zeno all quit. They thought leaving the plant would mean freedom. But Walter was just getting started. Step 3, exile. With a few more phone calls and a couple of anonymous letters, the troublemakers found themselves blacklisted across the district. They weren't fired, so they got no severance. They weren't laid off, so they had no benefits. And thanks to the Whisper campaign, no other plant would take them. In a closed-shop state, union solidarity was ironclad. These three weren't just unemployed. They were unemployable. Money ran out. Savings dried up. They tried to leave town, but the rumors followed. Every time they thought they'd found an out, a letter or a whisper would surface, reminding the new community who these men really were. Word spread, they were thugs who'd crippled a good man for no reason. No one wanted them. Slowly, their lives unraveled. Flynn, Mac, and Zeno descended into poverty, into alcoholism. They became shadows, homeless, destitute, trapped in the very town where they'd once strutted with arrogance. They couldn't even get state aid. And this was in a state known for generosity. It was as if every safety net had holes exactly where they stood. And Walter? He watched. Patient, methodical, relentless. He and his friends kept tabs on the three men for the rest of their lives. Any time one of them seemed close to getting a fresh start, the whispers would start again. A carefully placed phone call, an anonymous letter, just enough to slam the door shut once more. It didn't end with Walter's generation either. They had a contingency plan. If Walter passed before Flynn, Mac, or Zeno, the next generation would take over. His friends' kids would keep the watch, making sure the men who destroyed George never found peace. And that's exactly what happened. No one knows exactly how their stories ended. There are no records, no obituaries that can be traced. Maybe they died alone in back alleys. Maybe they faded into obscurity somewhere else. But one thing is certain. They lived the rest of their lives under the shadow of what they had done to George. Picture this. 3 young men, so sure they were untouchable, reduced to nothing. Every chance at escape snatched away, every door closed before it could open. They thought the system would protect them because the police weren't there. But they underestimated something far stronger than law enforcement. A father's love, sharpened by war, backed by loyalty, and fueled by righteous anger. In the end, they didn't just lose their freedom. They lost their futures, their reputations, their very identities. And that's a punishment no prison could ever deliver. Revenge stories like this remind us, sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's not a dramatic courtroom moment or a single act of violence. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and unrelenting. Justice that doesn't fade after a day, a week, or even a year. Justice that lasts a lifetime. So what do you think? Was Walter right to dedicate his life to making sure these men paid for what they did? Or did he take it too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you felt that sense of satisfaction hearing how 3 bullies got their lives dismantled piece by piece, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. Until next time, stay sharp. And remember, some debts don't disappear with time.